mic check. Okay, that's working. But I noticed the other text chat, the multi-chat's not working. Let me try to fix that. What's up now, Mick? Okay, so that's showing now. Okay, I don't know why the YouTube stuff is not showing. Maybe it'll work now. Thanks. Yeah, I just worked on the thumbnails today just to, have a thumbnail. Whatever I try to make sure that at least it's done properly. You said, was that from Copilot? No, I don't know. Copilot? No, I don't know what that is. I think that might be something. I think I've seen it on Windows before or something like that, but no, it's not from Copilot. You don't have to explain what it is, but I know that's not what it is because I didn't use something called Copilot. Okay. Oh, I don't have my wristbands on today. Let's see. I need to. The people are hungry, oh, the master is of us, so I pledge my allegiance to the one who has called me, oh. Be many, oh. Hungry, oh. Okay, so it's showing Twitch, it's just not showing YouTube. YouTube. Platforms. Wait. I'm new to using this thing. I can't remember where I used to see. Chat, export, import. I don't know where this is. Settings. Will be many that. I'm trying to make sure that my YouTube chat shows up on stream, by the way. That's what I'm doing right now. So if I skipping any messages, that's the reason why. Everything was working fine yesterday. Oh, there we go. Okay, it shows up here, account. There we go. All right. Okay, we're good now. So YouTube chat should show up now. Hungry, oh. Oh wait, so I can get stream elements to walk through this as well. I didn't know that was a thing. The people are hungry, oh. Of us, so I pledge my allegiance to the one who has called me, oh. Be many. Pam 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 pam. All right. We're chilling now. So, like I said yesterday, today is going to be Testimony Tuesday, but I'm going to do a little bit of a spin on it because I found this video that I think is interesting because, well, I know this is not a testimony, but I want to see why it's titled that way. Also, it has a very interesting person in it, an atheist who has gotten himself into a few conversations with a lot of very we're very well-learned Christians, so a lot of questions that most people will ask and no one will be able to have answers for, these people that he's been talking to lately have those answers. So it's always nice to actually get your questions answered, even though there's some people who don't actually ask questions at all. But at least if you do ask questions, these people are the kind of people who will be able to answer it. And I hope to be that kind of person someday. I feel like there are a lot of things I don't know yet, but by God's grace I will, at some point. Nalmik said, who else in the community is like me in regards to the personality? To be honest, if I open my mouth and talk what's on my mind, people will get salty. Lol, I've done it before. I don't know anybody else in the community that's like you. I think the only person that I could say is similar to you would be Latin, but Latin's also, he has is it some form of ADHD, or I can't remember exactly what he has, but he has a diagnosis for the reason why he acts the way that he acts. Since we've been speaking, you never told me that you've actually have any diagnosis for like checking like why your personality is different from most people, but he's diagnosed to have something that causes that. So yeah, I don't think anybody has a personality like you per se. I think you're one of the few people that I've met that have that kind of personality. Yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I know so far that I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, I haven't watched this video at all. Like the title says, Joe Weller presses me to surrender to God. The person's channel that I'm watching is what's his name again? Alex O'Connor, and he's an atheist, well-known atheist. I think we've watched a video of him on the channel where he was sitting down and talking to multiple Christians, and they were basically, he was telling them what he believes, what he thinks, and they were responding to him, basically trying to explain things that he might misinterpret. That's what we watched in that video. But now I want to see what this person is saying to him that makes him put this video saying presses me to surrender to God, because I'd like to see what the approach is like before we actually go and watch a testimony video. Let's see what we've got here.
That they experience what would be, they describe as the guidance of a higher power. Or, so it's not just like, there's someone over there that we can't see, so because it's not tangible, it may or may not be there.
Yeah.
It's like, this experience, this energy, this guidance.
What I'm saying is because
that?
I haven't felt anything like that, or I haven't seen that kind of thing.
Have you been open to it? Have you gone looking for it? Have you gone down that path?
Yeah, to the extent that
It looks a little bit different. I don't know, maybe hair is longer. I know that's not the point of the video, but he looks very different.
No, because a lot of people say, well, you think you're trying, but you're not open enough. And I think I've tried. I really, really think I've tried. And
how did you try?
Firstly, really important is being open to it. Like when you were telling us about your experience, and even my listeners might be surprised to hear me say maybe it was true, right? But if we're going to have this conversation, you at least need to try to put that hat on for that conversation. Otherwise, it's going to be pointless, right? And so, in religion, the first step is to actually
religion and God,
or God. Sorry, I should say, God's existence, or even just non-material, spiritual, whatever. The first step is going to be.
I already think
in order to say that you've tried it, you need to have first put yourself in a position where you believe in its plausibility. I think there's so much weird stuff in the universe that I very much believe in the plausibility of consciousness being immaterial, of the existence of God. I think that's true. And then being open to it just, I suppose, means not shutting down any opportunities.
Wait, did he just say, he said he's open to it. Does that mean he's saying, okay, so he's saying he believes something is true. I want to properly understand what he's talking about that he's saying is true, because he said that there's a consciousness out there. I want to make sure I'm understanding
the plausibility of consciousness being immaterial, of the existence of God. I think that's true.
He just said the existence of God, he believes that's true, but he's atheist. I need to understand why he said that.
And then being open to it just, I suppose, means not shutting down any opportunities to explore that. So if you start feeling a bit funny, a lot of people's like religious experiences happen in a, what do they call it, a hypergogic state, I think, which is between dreaming and waking. So you start having a bit of a sort of, you're sort of dreaming, and you know, sometimes you have a dream and you weren't sure it was a dream, like a false awakening, and you wake up and you check your phone and someone sent you a text, and then you wake up again and there's no text.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't quite tell if it was, but it's like weirdly vivid, right? So a lot of people have visions in those experiences, and you could wake up, and if I had such an experience where I woke up and I had a text from Jesus that said, you know, I love you, and then I was like, fuck me, I went back to sleep, and then I woke up and I was like, bloody hell, that text, and I looked and it wasn't there. I could just go, oh, that was just a dream, that was nothing, or I could go, well, hold on, let's really explore this. Or was I definitely asleep? How vivid was it? Was it a uniquely vivid dream?
Okay, I think I see his point. Is why is something like that, though it is significant that you received a message from Jesus on your cell phone, why shouldn't I just believe that it's something that I made up in my head, especially considering I'm focusing on it anyways. So there is a very plausible reason for me to, picture something like that happening, and it's just because I pictured it happening. But I think what people are defining as visions are not just seeing a man that's wearing a white robe and saying that I saw Jesus in a dream, so now he's real. I don't believe that that's what people talk about when they're talking about visions.
Do I think that you have to at least be willing to explore that kind of thing. Now, I've never had an experience like that, but if I did, my openness hopefully would extend to taking seriously the possibility that maybe that was actually some kind of spiritual vision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think
I've
most people that believe in God don't go, oh yeah, I believe because like Jesus texts me.
No.
Yeah, like that's that would be a weird, because that would be a very, very I mean, I wouldn't even condone a Christian who says that's the reason why they believe is because they were sleeping and they woke up in their dream basically and saw a text from Jesus, and then when they woke up it was no longer there, so because they dreamed it's real. Like, there are a lot of things people dream that are not real.
No, but most people have some kind of experience.
Right.
And I've just never had such an experience.
But you said you gave it a go to like put that hat on. Like, what did you do to give that a go?
Well, there are a few ways to answer that question. One is to say that, like, I got a degree in theology. Right, I tried my best.
Because most people would say it's a case of like surrendering, going, I surrender to God.
Yeah.
I surrender to the fact that I don't have it all figured out, and I am open to like God's plan for me or something, completely surrender. And that's how a lot of people would describe their like.
I think it's nice for someone like me to watch videos like this, especially because people look at me and they see like a very proper, guy kind of thing, like where it's like very structured, like kind of person. That's the way that I am. But when I watch people like this guy, and I think that's something I'm going to focus on doing, is just putting other people on the screen. So it's not like I'm looking at myself and saying because I don't have tattoos that makes me a Christian or anything like that, like because I don't have a ear piercing, stuff like that. Like, having people like this on the screen that people can watch, I think that's very important to know that it's not about whether you have a tattoo or you have a past or anything like that. Yes, for sure, for me, I was brought up in a Christian household. That definitely didn't make me Christian, but it's allowed me to align with certain values in my life in terms of how I treated people, how I talk to people, how I dress, what I did with my, what I put on my skin, what I didn't, how I grew my hair, all of that kind of stuff. But because that's my upbringing, I don't want it to confuse people into thinking that if your upbringing is not like mine, you don't do the things that I did, then that means you can't be saved, because the brain can make some very weird connections. So I think it's good for me to, use other people that are different from me as examples as well, because like one of the evangelists that I was listening to recently, he was talking about the fact that like there are some people who, if I'm coming out wearing a suit and a tie, you would never be able to, they would never be able to, I would never be able to reach them because I'm wearing a suit and a tie. They would be more likely to talk to someone who is wearing jeans and a t-shirt, you know. So just because if you don't talk to them, you can't share the message to begin with. So I think all of that just come into my mind, like all of that's very important to like diversify my content, so everything doesn't seem one dimensional from me.
Actually diving in head first and giving it a go. Have you ever done anything like that?
No, because of the fact that, like, in order to, as you put it, surrender to something, and people, like, you know, like Christians will listen to what you're saying and go, yes, that's Alex's problem. He needs to surrender to Christ. And maybe they're right. Maybe if I surrendered to Christ, whatever that means in practice, I would become a Christian. But the problem is, right, I think I've done as much as can be expected of a non-believer, or close to it. Maybe I haven't, but I like to think that I've done a lot a lot more than the average atheist should be expected to do, right? Okay, so you're an atheist. Well, how do you know? Oh, well, you should go to church and see. It's like,
is there any sense of fear?
Fear of what?
Of going surrender, because the idea of, especially like as a...
Wow, that's a unique question, because I feel like some people are scared of it being true. I never looked at the word like fear as like the reason for it. I've explained it in different ways, but some people are too scared of what life could be like if God is actually true. Like, now, you know, for example, like I talked about yesterday, let's say you have your own issues. Maybe you lie a lot or you steal, whatever it is, you know, you don't want to be put in a position now where, okay, now I've surrendered to this person who doesn't like all these things, but I still want to steal, I still want to lie and things like that. And you're too afraid to step in because you feel like you will fail at it. Because some people don't even go to exams because they feel like, or study things because they're too afraid that they could fail. But, or, you know, there's this saying of you miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take, something along those lines. And that right there is something I never thought of. It's just like fear could be the reason why you're not even taking the step.
As a territorial man, like the idea of, you know, I want to protect myself. I don't want to surrender. What?
Yeah.
Like, is there an element of like, I don't even want to experiment doing that? Because if I was like, all right, Alex, for the next month, 4 times a day, say the same phrases that basically, like, say the phrase that basically I surrender to God. I am open to being guided. Just to see if it is real.
Okay, so but to me, those are two different things, right? Saying, I could say 4 or 5 times a day, I am open to being guided. You know, God, if you're there,
I not actually believe it. Yeah.
Do that, but saying I surrender to God. What does that mean? What does it mean? Like, how would I? So right now, I don't believe it's true, but I want to say I'm open to it. So let's say, okay, I'm going to trial a policy for the next week. I'm going to surrender to God. What do I do? Like in practice, like what do you mean?
I would say saying those phrases with conviction, like genuinely meaning it. I surrender to God.
But how can you
surrender?
Mean it?
What do you mean?
How can you mean it?
So he's asking now, how can you mean it if you genuinely don't think he's real? How can you mean that you surrender to him? Now, I guess what my response to would be to this is, okay, do you believe that you have it all figured out in terms of who created the universe and what your purpose is in this life and what would happen after this, you die, after you pass away here? Do you believe 100% without a shadow of a doubt that you know exactly what's gonna happen? If that person's answer is yes, then it's a tall order, because that person believes at this point that they're all knowing, which means that the person is saying that they believe that they have some godly qualities, which that's a bigger thing to tackle. But if in any way, shape or form you're honest with the fact that you don't know these things, then that's when you can say, okay, you're surrendering the fact that you don't know everything. And you're not just, it's not like you're asking, okay, God or whatever being is out there, help me to know everything. No, you're not saying I want to become you, God, and so give me the knowledge. It is because I realize I don't know everything and I want to know what at least I'm supposed to do. I'm surrendering the idea of me trying to figure it out to you so that you can help me figure it out. That's the idea behind how I would define as the practical way, is you actually acknowledging that you can't figure it out on your own. It's interesting because I was speaking to Screw the other day. We have these conversations about like finding the truth and knowing what the truth actually is when there's so many different stories and ideologies out there. How do you know which one's actually true, which one's made up, which one's been made to be able to deceive you and things like that? But the reality is, maybe you can't read all the books in the world to be able to fully understand and perceive exactly what the truth is based off of eliminating all the negatives. But you can acknowledge that that is too tall a task and then give God a chance to be able to try to help you figure it out. So I think that would be my response to it, is acknowledging that there's a limit to your knowledge and accepting the idea that there is a being that is all-knowing that can help you figure out the answers to some of the questions that you need to know. Because like I've said before, if there is an afterlife and what I do, the decisions that I make while I'm on earth determines what happens in that afterlife, not just me, my family, my friends, everybody is going to bear consequences of whether I made that decision or not, or whether I talk to people about what I learned or not. Simple case, without going into spiritual things, right? Let's say I know that Apple's a really good company and the stocks are going to increase in the next few months based on some data analysis that I've done. Me knowing that information and using it could allow me to get more money, which could in turn allow me to help my family more. So it's not just about me, it's about the people that I can affect based on the knowledge that I have. So in this same regard, if you're looking at it as I have this information that like this thing that I don't know is about what happens to me and my family and my friends when we all die. Now I can tell them, okay, this is what I know. I can give you the information. Now, of course, just like the stocks, you can't force them to buy the stocks. In fact, some of them might not even have enough money at the time to be able to buy the stocks, in which case in the faith part, it's like they don't have enough faith to be able to believe at that moment to be able to buy those stocks. But at least you've planted a seed. And that's the same way that I see it here, is these decisions don't just affect you, the person who is trying to figure out what the truth is. It affects your friends and your family that's around you. That's why, so it's important, and it's even more significant because of the people that are around you, because it's either you didn't do anything to help or you did something that changed their lives, that changed their future. So, and I always like to remind people when I talk about the afterlife that as much as the afterlife is important, because any of us could go at any point, while you're on this earth, there is a lot of people who live daily without feeling empty because they feel like they don't have a purpose in life. They don't have anything to back up, to go back to. They don't have anything to fall to. It's just, they just feel like there's a void that can't be filled. There's also that you get to be a part of while you're on earth.
If you haven't actually surrendered yet. So for example,
you're the one that's just said, "Oh, I put the hat on," so I've done the research. So
what I mean by putting the hat on is putting the hat on of taking a position which I might otherwise think is implausible, and treating it as though it might be plausible, and saying, like, even if all my instincts are telling me that's complete BS, that's nonsense, I'm going to put the hat on of being like, okay, let's consider if this might be true. That's different from saying I'm going to put the hat on of saying it is true, you know? So suppose, I don't know, have you ever tried being a Muslim?
no.
Okay, so why don't for the next week you surrender to God in an Islamic sense, you know, like submission to I mean, Islam means submission. It would require a different kind of thing to, I don't know what your religious convictions are right now, but you're not a Muslim. So for the next week, just surrender to God, to Allah, which is just the Arabic word for God, of course. Like, would you do that? And if you did, like, how would you do that?
I'm not sure about the Islam faith and how it would go around doing that. I mean, I don't necessarily like prescribe to an actual religion, so to speak. I believe, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I'm open to anything. I think that's the thing. Like, I accept that I don't have it figured out.
So you can then be open to something. You can be open to the truth of Islam or Christianity or something without having to.
Okay, so I guess the difference here, if somebody were to ask me, why wouldn't I surrender to Allah, for example, it'll come down to one thing, is whether or not I feel like I have Islam figured out or not. Because I guess technically I see his point. He's read the Bible and he believes that he has it figured out. But the only difference, where I think there might be a difference, is in if you read the Bible and your conclusion is, I don't believe what they're saying, that's different from you read the Bible and you believe that everything that's said there are contradictions or mistakes, or, you know, there's different things. Like, I think the difference is, you might not believe something doesn't mean that it's not, you don't think it's true, or that the person who wrote it, or you don't see it as the person who wrote it believes it's true either. So I feel like it's a little bit more complex, but I think that would be my response for that. Would be, if it was something that I knew that I could figure out, then I wouldn't be surrendering to it, because I know because I've figured it out, and that's different.
Say, like, I surrender to this thing and I've given it a go in that respect. You can still meaningfully say, I'm open to it, without even. And if somebody says, well, have you ever surrendered to it? And you go, well, no, but I don't think that rules out my openness to it.
If we're saying like the concept of God, because imagine, right? Imagine all of us don't realize that, like, imagine we're trying to figure life out and have it figure everything out the best we can with our little, like, pea brain, and that's all we've got. But there is this higher power that, if we allow in, can guide us in a way that we could never even comprehend trying to do so. It's like the same power as like 5 million of our own brain. Imagine there is that, but we're too proud to go, no, I don't even want to comprehend that, because that's ridiculous. And I've got too much scientific evidence that's ridiculous. Like, imagine we're just missing out on that guidance. Imagine we're missing out on that, what could be. That's why I'm very open to just exploring these things and, like, giving it a go. And I've definitely noticed, I mean, I have never really been someone that's, like, religious or, like, 100% there's a God or there isn't. But, like, giving it a go. And I've gone, okay, let me just try this. Why not? Give it a go. So let me surrender. Let me just see what happens. And one thing I will say, when I did give that a go, there's a lot of clarity. Clarity that came through of knowing what I want, what I'm getting pulled to do, things that are like, I'm getting a lot of fruit of my labor, and things that weren't necessarily just selfish things that were having a positive impact in the world, but also feeding me. I mean, I've just gone to do this Uganda wrestling video where I've ended up, like, finding this community that have made a whole entire wrestling organization out of nothing, but along the way found out that they have no health and safety services. And it's tied in amazingly well to make this video, not only to make my wrestling debut. I love wrestling. That's something I've never really had the courage to, like, pursue, but I really got a pull to do this. And also we're raising funds for them to buy an ambulance and an emergency care, and we're making, like, a really positive impact. And I'm like, that idea and that pull to do that didn't just come into, I didn't just think of that. I didn't just go, I'm just going to do this. It's like, and I wonder if these ways that we get pulled to do certain things, there is a higher power that, if we allow in, can influence us in certain ways. I don't know.
Maybe the answer is, to my question, like, will you surrender to what is the most fundamental thing, right? Okay, and I'm saying, well, I don't know if that's possible. Like, you kind of have to be convinced that something exists in order to surrender to it. Like, if I said, you know, will you surrender yourself to the police officer outside? And you're like, I don't think there is a police officer outside. And I would just surrender to him anyway. You'd be like, I kind of literally can't, because if I don't believe he's there, I can't, like, surrender to him.
Isn't that everyone who...
You surrender to something that you don't believe in is the question here. Can you surrender to something that you don't believe in. Because there's a lot about surrendering that has to do with you believing in it. I'm just trying to process that question. I guess you have to believe in it in some form or fashion to surrender to it. Or believe that someone else believes it. That could also be a reason why. So for example, like someone tells you there's a cop outside. You believe that that person saw a cop outside, so you hid. Your belief is based off of what someone else told you, not because of your own direct belief. You didn't hear a cop, you didn't see a cop, you don't know a cop. You just heard that the person, you're just believing that person. So because but that's what I'm saying, there's still a little bit of you believing. Now, because you believed that that person did see a cop outside, that's why you now believe that there is a cop outside. So at some point you do believe. So I think you still, whether it's directly or indirectly, in some form or fashion, you still do have to believe in it to properly surrender to it.
Everyone who does start believing or surrenders to God has to come from a place of not surrendering to God. So until you've surrendered and until you've actually done it, you can't go, I know for sure that there is a God.
Yeah, but that for me is the
Do you get
great
me?
catch-22, which is that I feel like I need to think that the thing exists in order to surrender to it, but I'm
So if you were
sometimes
a
told that I need
caveman-
to surrender to it in order to think that it exists.
If you were a caveman though, and you were
Yes.
told like, mate,
That's not exactly how it works, but okay.
there's this like Wi-Fi that's going to let you FaceTime your friend around the world right now.
yeah.
You'd be like, mate, I can't see what Wi-Fi. I can't see that. That can't exist. It's not tangible. I can't see it. I don't believe it's there. So therefore, I'm not even going to try and like FaceTime my friend, because what even is that? It's like that caveman can't comprehend the Wi-Fi concept. So what I wonder is that like, because we can't comprehend, or we say we can't comprehend something.
That's a good way to go about it. It's like, because you can't comprehend something doesn't mean you can't try it, right? Like a cave. The believing part is where things get
we
tricky.
can't figure everything out.
Yeah.
Just shutting off and going, I can't comprehend it, therefore it doesn't exist. Is that?
Okay, so suppose I do hear what you're saying, by the way, and I'm trying to unpack it, but I guess I'm trying to explain why I would defend the view that without having done exactly what you're asking for, I've still done a lot. I would say, for example, imagine that I said to you right now that kind of Wi-Fi thing doesn't exist. It's not Wi-Fi, it's some kind of, let's call it Fi-Wi. It's this thing which like exists and will allow you right now, without any the use of any device or anything, you don't need to pick up the iPad. You can just right now communicate with someone like down the street, like instantly, right? Okay. And you say, I don't know about that, I don't really believe it. And I say, all you've got to do, just try it, just surrender to it. And you're like, how do I, okay, like how, what do you mean? I'm like, you just have to surrender to this thing. So, okay, well, how literally, like, how do I act? Like, where is it?
Okay, and that's the problem with, I think I see where he's coming from, and that's the problem with I think that's also the issue. The issue is you only want to work with the things that you can understand and you can comprehend, because that's what he keeps going back to, is like, okay, I don't know how, there's no practical way for me to take this act, so therefore I can't do it. That's what he's basically saying. He's saying, how can I surrender? Like, I don't know what it is. And the other guy is saying, just do it. It's like, for example, the caveman that doesn't think the phone's gonna work. Okay, fine. You don't know it's gonna work, doesn't make sense, whatever. Just press that. Just press the button. Just press it. I know you don't understand. I know it doesn't make sense. Just press the button. And I guess the dilemma comes in now is this deals with like a mind submission kind of thing, where in your mind you are telling your mind to think a new thing. You're basically putting your thoughts under your own control, and you're telling it, okay, think this instead, and that's where it seems difficult. But that's literally what he's saying. Like, I hear him that, okay, there's not a step A, do this, step B, do this, step C, do this, to show that, okay, now I believe, now I surrender. But I'm not telling you there's a 3 steps. I'm telling you just push the button. But the problem is, on a phone, it's just a button you could just press. But with this, it's a heart posture thing where you need to basically tell your mind, this is what we are going to do now. And that seems a lot more difficult, because it's like, how do I do that? How do I change my own mind? Well, most times in the way we go about it in life is, we experience something enough times to be able to change our mind, or we see the thing that shows us that we're wrong, so then we change our mind. And in this case, the person who's changing your mind is also God. So there's a lot you just gotta give him. You just gotta give him the chance. You just gotta do that.
Up here, where is it? Like, how do I close my eyes? I'm like, oh no, because the thing that I'm describing is also, by the way, completely ineffable and beyond human comprehension. But you just need to surrender to it. I'd be like, I'm not saying I don't want to, or like I think that's a bad thing to do, or whatever. I just mean, like, in practice, unless I have some comprehension of what it is that we're talking about, I would just find it impossible. Like, how would you surrender to the phi y? Or how would you, if I said just use it, just try using the phi y, you'd be like, I want to. I'm open to it. If you show me, like, where it is and how I use it, maybe, do I put my hands together? Do I need to, like, do a flappy motion like Spider-Man, working out how to do that? But if there's no directional guidance, then what exactly? And so what I mean, I'm not saying there might not be an answer to this question, but I suppose that's what I'm asking you is specifically, what do you mean with, like, surrender to God? You said, like, saying the phrase. Okay. But you can say the phrase and not.
I don't mean it.
So what do you mean?
Say, like, your parents, when you were a child, guiding you somewhere. Mm-hmm. You either do as you're told, and essentially you're surrendering by, like, following their guidance of, like, holding their hand as you cross the road or something. It's like, I don't know. I feel like we know when we're surrendering to something.
People often feel
we know when we're not. When we're
feel
rebelling,
like they're being led somewhere, right? Like, if you're thinking, if you're starting to reflect on morality, and maybe you read, like, the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads or the Quran or whatever, and then people say, like, I just felt like I was sort of being led somewhere by this text. And maybe that's the thing that is required. You need to have this feeling that there is something which is guiding you, pulling you, a bit like your friend who was next to you in your psychedelic experience, where, like, they're there, not physically, not in a way, but there's just some way I can feel that it's there. And to surrender to God is to allow yourself to follow that where it takes you. Something like that, maybe. Because that is a... Look, yeah.
Imagine, like, there's just ultimate love out there for you. Ultimate love that you're just like, man, I don't want to experience that.
He's like, how do I, like, it's like, how do you explain this? Because at the end of the day, he's asking him to explain something that's not really tangible. It's not really tangible. And that's where the difficulty is. But, it's interesting because even with all the things that I've said today, I don't know how I would properly, like, explain this to someone when they're having difficulty with it. What I do know is everything that he's saying in terms of why it's tough for him comes down to the fact that he's trying to have a certain amount of control and use a certain amount of his mind to define how he goes about it, which means there's still a lot of you. There's a lot of you that's involved in it. And the whole point is about surrendering, is to stop having you be involved and let someone else lead you, let someone else guide you. That's what's tough. And that's why he talked about fear earlier, how as a man, for example, you could feel like you don't want to let go because you've been trained to be in charge, to control things, so.
But ultimately, like, that love is, I believe, like, the ultimate experience, ultimate feeling, the ultimate, like, reason for being, like, love, give and receive love. Imagine there's that ultimate love up there that could be yours.
That's a
but
couple of questions.
You're rejecting it. And that's, if you're saying like, what am I surrendering to? Imagine you're surrendering to ultimate love. And you're like, and think of it like that.
All right, that was good. That was good. So now we could jump into the testimony I wanted us to actually watch today. I'm actually very interested in this one myself. Outside of watching it with the stream, I actually want to hear what this is about. So welcome. Testimony Tuesday, our very first one. Hopefully this is going to be as engaging as I want it to be.
Hey guys, welcome to Capturing Christianity. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi, and I'm here today with Dr. Cy Gart. Welcome to the show. You've been on the channel before, but
I have.
Yeah, so here you're today with us in person, and I'm so excited to meet you. Wish I could see your wife, but I'm sure that she's here. She's here in spirit, isn't she?
I miss her too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so today we're talking about your journey from atheism all the way to Christianity.
Right.
And there's a whole lot that's happened in between, back when you were an atheist and now that you're a Christian. We'll talk about all the steps that kind of led there, some of the science that because your background is in, what is it, biochemistry. And so your background as a scientist, but that's actually what led you to embrace God's existence and then eventually to become a Christian.
Right.
So let's start at the very beginning. Tell me about your upbringing. I know we've talked about this on the channel before, but let's kind of go through it a little bit more in some more detail.
Sure. Well, I won't go into too much because, as you said, we have covered it, and it's in my book, so people can find it. But I grew up in a family 3 generations of atheists. They were not only atheists, they were very left-wing. My parents were members of the American Communist Party in the 1930s, which is rare. And so their atheism was very strong, very militant, and that's what I grew up with. I assumed that there could not be any such thing as God, or it's not possible for there to be a God. Totally materialistic. My father was a chemist, scientist, so that was the worldview I grew up in. And also the same worldview I had when I went to college, where I started studying chemistry, chip off the old block. And, when you're a chemistry major, you also have to learn some physics. So I was learning things about quantum mechanics and things in physics that seemed a little strange to me, but I didn't really worry about it too much. And then eventually I decided I really wanted to study life. And rather than be a biologist, I wanted to.
I wonder how much people actually get, like when you learn, because for people who are studying like chemistry, physics, all these things at the university level, you're learning so many facts and probably some weird things too, that when you learn them, you're like, this is what they say. But like, just imagine if people defined gravity in science, as whatever goes up must come down, right? And then you threw a ball up and it didn't fall. I feel like there's probably just feeling and probability that there are a lot of things in science that makes people like this feel like, wait, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I see why you're saying it, but that doesn't really make sense. I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that, and that's what he might be referring to.
Study the chemistry of life. So I went into biochemistry, where I got my PhD. And what happened was that even in college, as a young man, I began to feel there was something missing in my life. And I later realized it was some sense of spirituality, which I think is very important for all people. But I found that, whatever that you want to call that, in science at first. I was thinking, well, the science is great because it gives you a real sense of purpose, a real sense of doing something good in the world, and it's true, so it's great. But there was one catch, which was that what I was learning in science didn't jive with the materialistic worldview. And I couldn't have said it that way. I just felt it. For example, in graduate school, I learned about the process by which proteins are made in cells. And that's a very complex process that involves a tremendous amount of biomolecules interacting with each other, and the complexity is just incredible. And I remember feeling like a chill going down my spine. It was like, this is amazing. How did this get here? And it was something that I couldn't answer. Later, of course, like most biologists, I just came up with the answer, which is evolution. Evolution does everything. But when at that time, I kind of left things as it was and as they were, and I just started wondering about really whether science was really the only way to find any truth. And pretty soon I rejected that, as many people have. I was not yet ready to believe in God, and that took a lot of other steps. It required me to kind of break down my resistance to the idea, which I was born with. And it's kind of hard to, reject all of that. But eventually I did.
Wow, I think that's also something that's important. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, even I just talked about it today, about being brought up in a Christian family, in a Christian household. But everybody's brought up in something. The name might not be Christian or Muslim or, something that we're used to. Some people are even brought up in scientism households. So I think that's one thing that I just realized is, like, everybody's brought up in some way to believe in something, to understand things, or maybe not even believe in something, but to understand life from a certain perspective. And, that's why when we're even talking about surrendering to something you don't believe in, the idea of surrendering to something might be new to you. So you're even like trying to even start. It's like, what am I doing to begin with? Like, how am I supposed to do this kind of thing? So pretty interesting for him to share it that way, that like, I was born to refute the idea of a God.
And then
were there any external factors that were helping to open you up?
Yes,
to God?
Absolutely. I was brought to a church by a friend.
And this was still when you were an atheist?
Oh, yeah. And I was, maybe by then I was a little agnostic.
Okay.
I wasn't really sure.
So you got to the point of agnostic all on your own?
That was all on my own, and that was due to the science I was learning. Because the science I was learning did not support a strict atheism. It did not support strict materialism.
Okay.
And that comes from quantum theory, and it comes from, the observer effect and all sorts of things in physics, but it also came from what I was...
I also find that there's a lot of people who talk like this, which is, by talk like this, I mean, like, the same people who create the books about science and things like that, they end up telling people, they try at least to tell, it's just that voice is not as loud, but those are the same people who try to tell you, like, yo, this science that I learned, this science that I taught you, in fact, I'm a professor in school and I can teach you about evolution, I can teach you about quantum this and quantum that, but there's something that's, I can't see all of I can't see all of this and believe that there's not something else out there. And that's what those same people would say. But then, because the voice of I can't fully explain it is not as loud as, or not the voice of there's something else out there, it's not popular, it's not what people want to put in the news. You can't release a publication saying, well, I don't really know what it is. Nobody's gonna buy that book. But when you say, I know for a fact that this is something, then people want to, because number one, now you're the one that's being held accountable for it because you're the one that said that you know it. But all of that to say, like, the idea behind people not sharing, like the fact that people who say these things about science and understand it very well can still tell you that there's something more to life than just that science is missing something, but nobody really hears that, nobody really pays attention to that, and it's unfortunate.
I was learning in biochemistry and about how life works.
Right.
It just seemed that saying evolution explains everything in life was too glib. It was too easy. It didn't seem to me to be enough.
That's interesting because I've heard a lot of scientists, even like Peter Atkins, will say that God is like a lazy explanation. And you're saying that evolution is kind of like a lazy explanation.
Well, you know, at that time, I would have said God was a lazy explanation too. I had no idea what the explanation was. I didn't really know what God was. I didn't understand very much about God. But yeah, I think evolution can explain a lot. But there are some key things that it cannot explain, and that includes the origin of life. And that's not my view. That's a very Darwin said the same thing. Richard Dawkins has said the same thing.
Yeah.
The process of evolution.
Again, when I'm talking about these people and them also saying things, right? Darwin. That's a name that if you hear it, even if as far as you've been to school, you've heard that name. You've heard about Darwin. And he's saying here that Darwin said he also shares the view that yes, evolution is a thing, but it doesn't explain everything. That voice of it doesn't explain everything just doesn't get, it's just not as loud. That's all it is. It's not that it's not there, it's just not as loud, you know. I'm trying to even think like how some people have misconceptions in Christianity as well. Yeah, like how there are a lot of people who see Christians who do negative things, and when someone who is a believing Christian does a negative thing, all of a sudden the word is not coming to me, but the bad news basically is what's more heard. You don't hear that much about the good news. It's just like people talk about this with marriages as well, that when you have a good marriage, everything is going great, nobody's saying anything. In fact, the person who's in the marriage is just enjoying the marriage. But when something bad happens, all of a sudden it becomes news. It's just not as loud.
Called Darwinian evolution or biological evolution doesn't deal with the origin of life at all. So, and I'll get into that a little more, I think. But the external factors that helped me were, as I said, going to a church for the first time and seeing something that I absolutely didn't expect. I thought that when you walked into a church, the first thing that would happen is the priest or the pastor would start yelling at you, you know, telling you that you're sinful and, you know, you're going to go to hell.
Where did you get that impression from?
Well, that's the impression I got growing up, you know. That
from who, though? Who did? Well, I mean, maybe it was a different time, but
it was a different time, but it was also...
Sorry for the quick claps.
And by the way, it's not...
I'll get a note next time.
You'll find atheists talking about, you know, the horrors of Christianity and how you know, people are doing nothing but casting you into hell all the time, and lakes of fire and sin, and I felt, you know, very nervous, and it was.
And your experience was nothing like that? No,
it was a Catholic church run by Franciscans, and the priest gave a sermon about love. I mean, just love, period. Not, you know, love God, but just love each other, love. And I thought, boy, this is very mild. You know, why, you know, I think I've been lied to. So at that point, I looked into this a little more. I wasn't a theist yet, but I started looking at the Bible for the first time. The Old Testament left me a little cold. I couldn't really get into it, didn't understand it much. But I read the book of Matthew and I read the book of Acts, and I found...
Man, there's something about the book of Matthew that even for me, you know, after being saved, going back and reading some of that text, the way it basically lays out prophecies and prophecies fulfilled through Jesus. The only question you can have after reading Matthew, if you actually take it and read that book, is this person lying? Because if he's telling the truth, Jesus is too important to be ignored. That's the only question you can have. Because fine, yes, it seems like, oh yeah, for me as a Christian, I could just say, well, yeah, this explains everything. But most people that are not believers yet have to get over the barrier of, is this true? But the reason you'll ask that question is because if it's true, Jesus is too important to be ignored. That's simply all you can come out of other than that. And when you start to think about how unless Matthew is the biggest, smartest, first of all, most impossible conspiracy theory ever, for you to, because conspiracy theory, you do it with people, but basically this person would have had to do a conspiracy theory with people who lived 2,000 years before him to be able to try to then deceive people 2,000 years later. It doesn't even make sense. So unless basically you're stuck with the fact that it's probably true, which means you need to pay attention to it. And I think, just to make sure that I'm clear and I'm articulating myself properly, the book of Matthew basically talks about how there are different prophecies from the time of Moses, which is about 2,000 years before Christ came into the picture. There were a lot of things that were written by Moses that the Jewish people have taken to become law over years and years and years. Prophecies that have been written over years, including one that happened, I believe, from Daniel about maybe 490 years before Christ, or about 490 years, 500 years before Christ. They have all these prophecies at that time. And then Matthew is one of the disciples of Jesus who is currently experiencing this person fulfill all those things and writing it down stage by stage, from where he was born, where he was going to go to as a kid, to where he was going to be from, to what he was going to do, to what he was going to say. Like all these details that we're reading that was written years and years ago, passed down from generation to generation, is now coming to fulfillment. There's just no other reason for you to doubt it. But I do understand that there is a side of it which you have to actually open your heart to it. You can't just, it's not everybody. If everybody could just read it and understand, then everybody will be Christian already. But not everybody actually opens their heart to it. And I think at some point we would read, I don't know if because we're reading John right now on our Monday and Friday sessions, but I don't know if John actually talks about the parable of the sower. But if you see the parable of the sower, it makes you understand why not everybody is going to be open enough to it, ready enough to it, calm enough about it, pay attention enough to it to be able to receive it, even though it's there plain as day. Opening your heart is different from opening your mind. I'd say, and in this conversation I've been talking about so far, there's two, like I go over both of them like interchangeably, and it's just because you have to open yourself to it. I'll just say yourself to it to be able to accept it properly. What's up, Screw? And just simply put, like, I understand that as much as I say it's very obvious, if you, like we talk about, open yourself to it and read it and just try to understand it for what it is. It's very clear, but you still got to open yourself to it to be able to accept it. I can agree with that statement. Yeah, like it's because I'm listening to this, and when he mentions that he read the book of Matthew, or he read the Old Testament, and he was like, yeah, I have no idea what these people are talking about. And remember, this is a scientist. This is someone who's read hundreds of books throughout his life. He reads the Old Testament and he's like, what is going on here? But then when you open Matthew and he literally lays it out to you, I'm telling you, you open that book, whether it's Matthew, actually, Mark, Luke, or John, whichever one you open up, you're in trouble then. You're in trouble at that point, because now you know there's something serious going on here that you can't just ignore, easily. Some people still ignore it, don't get me wrong, but you can't just ignore it easily. But let's keep listening.
Found those very moving. The book of Acts struck me as actual history. I was sure that this was not something anyone made up. It just didn't fit.
Because, again, that's why I say, like, some of it, the amount of conspiracy theory that you would have to develop in your mind to think that those books were written as a to be able to try to deceive you. Way back then, they wrote these books to try to deceive you. They also got themselves killed. They sacrificed themselves back then just to be able to deceive you. They cared so much. Like they cared so much about what's gonna happen to you in 2025, 2,000 years after, or maybe let's say, yeah, about 2,000 years after them. They cared so much about deceiving you. That's why they let themselves go through all of that. Like, you think it's really about you. They really, really care about you that much, that they really hate you that much. Let me put it that way, that they really trying to deceive you. It just doesn't make sense.
So that got me thinking, and then
and I'm not saying anybody can't write a book and claim for it to be something with an agenda. Don't get me wrong. My point is the amount of detail that goes into those books. That's why I'm saying that much, because the amount of detail, this is over 2,000 years. Well, more accurately, over about 5,000 years. And these are people who are writing things in history, and everything is lining up. But you believe all those people over all those years just had a conspiracy theory just so that they could deceive you. Let's be real.
I learned more and more, and as I talk about in my book, I'm not going to go into detail now. I had several experiences, including some dreams and an waking experience that I had to attribute to the Holy Spirit. And at that point, after many years, by the way, I'm compressing 2 decades into this discussion. But at that point, I realized that Christianity is true, and Christ was real, and he lived and died and rose.
And I think, well, I just want to point out the 3 things he talked about here. He read the Bible. It was clear to him that it was a historical book, first of all, which means he has believed at this point now that historically this event did happen, and there was this man who did these things, and there were these people who came as a result of it. Now, for people who are historians, I just want to let you guys know about this. For people who are historians, they studied history. They don't have anything to do with Christianity. There are things that they would read in the Bible and instantly know that it's history. They're not going to think, oh, this person's trying to make it up, because they learned it in history from people who were not Christians, who sharing there's a way that they authenticate what happened in the past, whether it's true or not. So they've learned in history certain things, and when they read those kind of books, they know that it matches with what they've been reading about history. So it's a different perspective. Just to give you guys an idea of why he could say, when he starts reading up Acts of the Apostle, because it's telling you stories about things that were happening around the time after Jesus died. And those things, this is 2,000 years, like I always say, it's not that long ago. It's not that outside of not what's normal for us. So these people can literally tell that this is not just some made up stuff. This is not Spider-Man and Batman. This is history, So he talked about reading Acts, understanding it to be history. And then he talks about actually having experiences that made him where he couldn't dispute that there was something else that were bringing those experiences to him. And now he had no doubt. So I'm just pointing out that there's a process that starts with looking, believing, and then if you're lucky, early enough, because he said over 2 decades, but if you're lucky, early enough, you might actually experience things that would help you. But those first 2 steps are very important. You need to search for it.
And I became a Christian.
Yeah,
Look back.
I want to focus in on one part of your story, but I also want to make a kind of general comment about so sometimes I see atheists say like, okay, now it's just like this one, that is the reason why he became a Christian, and that usually they pinpoint some like bad thing that happened, or you know, this is a bad reason to become a Christian.
Right.
But in your case, and I think in a lot of cases, probably the vast majority of cases, that it's a multiplicity of different things
Yes, right.
that all together, you know,
Exactly.
built up over many years. You said you're compressing in a story into, 5 minutes, something
Right.
that happened to you over the course of 20 years.
Right.
And so obviously you're leaving things out, and you can't actually get the sense of like all of these things building up and leading to this huge paradigm shift in your thinking and your worldview.
Yeah.
But that's just the point that I wanted to make, is that there's a whole lot of things going on
Oh, yeah.
in your story.
Yeah.
And they all work together. Like it started out, from atheism to agnosticism,
Right.
based purely on the science. And then you had these other experiences, and everything kind of played together to lead you to Christ. So that's one point I want to make. And then the second point was to bring us back to focus on one area that really got you considering leaving atheism.
Right.
And I understand, is it abiogenesis? That's one of the
or-
main
yeah.
things. So tell me more about that. How did that, looking into that, really bring you more toward Christianity, toward theism?
Well, it's interesting because abiogenesis is a very active field of research, and people are looking at it very intensely in various ways. I've done a little bit myself, but
Have you published?
yes, I have
Okay.
one paper published and one that's just about to be approved, both on the same subject, which I'll get to in a second. But as I mentioned, abiogenesis, nobody thinks that it has anything to do with, standard evolution. The general idea among scientists, anyway, and the atheist ideas who are not scientists are not worth discussing, but the general scientific idea is that life began through what's called chemical evolution. And chemical evolution is very different from biological evolution because there's no natural selection. And there's no replication.
There's no mutations.
Yeah, what chemical evolution is when you take chemicals, you put them together, and they either react or they somehow are able to do things only on the basis of chemistry, without.
This is something where I don't have much knowledge of, but when I first heard about this, when I first heard about what I can articulate as the chemical nature of the beginning of life, it was hard for me to even listen to the evolution story at all. I couldn't even, because when you come up, if you understand at the basic level of chemistry, right, of just components, different elements in the air, in the world, or in the universe, accidentally causing reactions and not reacting, and that to be the origin of human beings that we are right now. There's always a point in the story whenever I watch evolution stories where they go on chemical, and they're just like, okay, and black screen, fade into new screen, human beings. There's always that point, because there's just the idea of chemical accidents forming human beings. It's an idea that science came up with that just, it is. Let's keep playing the video.
Any mutation, without any replication, and without any natural selection. And that's pretty hard to do. Jim Tour, who's in this neighborhood, has often said quite strongly and correctly that people who say that we've solved so many problems in abiogenesis, we're almost there, are just wrong. He says it a little more strongly than I do.
I was listening to something with him the other day.
But he's correct.
He's so forceful.
Yeah.
If I have to guess right now, I would guess that abiogenesis means the idea of the genesis of life, the start of life not being from biology. That's what I think it is, but you guys know me. If you watch this stream, you know what I'm about to do. I'm gonna Google it just so I actually know what we're talking about. Abiogenesis, and yeah, I need to get a better keyboard. That's not gonna click and clack every time. Okay, so abiogenesis, according to Gemini, says is the scientific theory describing the natural process by which life is believed to have arisen from non-living matter. Yeah. Okay, so that's what I thought it was. Like, well, here we go.
Forceful, but he's right, and I know why he gets frustrated sometimes, because he is a chemist, a very good chemist, and he knows more than anyone that that's not how chemistry works. Chemistry, doesn't do things for any reason. Life does things because of natural selection, perhaps, or because of the way life works. And you can get evolution, but you can't get it started. And I started thinking about this years ago, especially related to one of my interests, which is, how the DNA works by coding the existence of proteins which cause life. And Stephen Meyer has written about this in Signature of the Cell, and he in his recent book, The Return of the God Hypothesis, he talks a little bit about it as well. But I was focusing on one specific aspect, which is critical to the origin of life, to the origin of evolution, and that is the accuracy of self-replication, because nothing in the universe self-replicates accurately other than living cells. No chemical self-replicates, no machine self-replicates, crystals don't self-replicate, even DNA doesn't self-replicate. But a living cell can make copies of itself that are 99.9999% accurate. That's astonishing. How does that happen? It involves a tremendous number of really complex things, including the genetic code, including ribosomes and DNA replication and protein synthesis, things that are just too complicated to describe without slides.
Or without a semester of...
Without a semester of biology, yeah, or chemistry or whatever. So if you have to have self-replication in order to have evolution, how do you get all this? How did that self-replication get there?
Yeah.
It couldn't have evolved because there's no evolution.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been studying and what I published on recently. The fact that, in fact, as I assumed, using various models that I'm not going to get into, that there are thresholds. And if you don't start out with a cell that already is pretty good at accurate self-replication, you can't do it. You'll never get living cells, and you'll never get evolution going. And as I say, that's been published in a theoretical journal.
Okay, so you've got to get the cell first in order to get it up and going and get any evolution. Right. But then to get to that point, to get to the first cell, you need just too many things. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, you need too many things that are too difficult to explain through only chemical evolution. So what is
the current scientific consensus? Is that
what's the current
scientific consensus about abiogenesis?
I'm curious.
It depends who you talk to. If you talk to people who are not working in the field, many of them will say, "Oh yeah, we're getting there. We've made a lot of progress. We know that amino acids, were in meteors, so they probably, developed or formed in the primeval Earth. We know that nucleotides can make long polymers with RNA." That's all true, but the people who are actually the leaders in this field, know the details, and the details are exactly what Jim Tour says. It doesn't happen. You don't get long polymers, you get short polymers. You don't get self-replication, you get annealing, you get junk rather than good stuff. That's what they know. And frankly, I think many of them are getting discouraged. It looks like not a lot of progress has been made. In fact, very little. And the numbers of problems just keep expanding. So,
So the alternative that you arrived at was what?
well, so I didn't know what I thought there's something missing, and this was how this affected my journey to faith was that it helped break down this absolute certainty that everything is explainable by materialistic science.
Okay.
But I didn't know what the answer was.
Right.
Once I became a believer and I started thinking, well, God is the creator of the universe, but I also said, not just the universe, he's also the creator of life and the creator of human beings, all of which are not explainable by any other means. So, but how? See, that's my question, because knowing that God did something to me is not enough. I want to know a little more details. I don't know if anyone can ever learn that or understand that, because we don't know how God works, obviously. But I want to keep looking at it.
Even if
I
you
want to keep,
couldn't know
investigating various hypotheses.
the complexity is also an issue.
Stop doing scientific research on the issue, but I think we need to be open, and it may be that biology is at the same place that physics was before Einstein came up with relativity. They were kind of stuck. They had solved everything except this nasty thing called light, which nobody could understand. And when Einstein solved light through relativity, it changed physics forever. And it turned out physics was nowhere near complete. And now we're in a position where, we have a huge amount of more knowledge, which makes the physical picture of the universe totally different than we originally thought. And I think biology is in exactly the same place right now. We need to expand our tools. We need to include new concepts into our studies of biology. And I'm not only the only one saying this, there are even some non-theists who are saying this. And one of those concepts may be teleology, purpose. Perhaps we need to put purpose back into scientific equations, which has been taken out of ever since Darwin. The whole idea of evolution is it's blind, right? The blind watchmaker. It has no direction, no purpose. Well, the direction we know is wrong. Simon Conway Morris has shown that there is a direction in evolution through his amazing studies on the Burgess Shale and other things. He has shown that there are constraints. Evolution doesn't do just anything. It does only certain things, and it does it over and over and over again. So there's a direction. There are laws that seem to govern what actually can happen. It's not all random chance. We need to find out what those laws are, and we need to find out what they're about. And here's where I think philosophy becomes very important, because scientists are not good at figuring out what is the basis of science. Once they make a discovery and they find a law, fine, they can then write an equation and have it as a law. But oftentimes it takes some thought and some new approaches. I mean, Einstein had to use a whole different mathematical approach to get where he got. I think we're going to need to do the same thing. And I think that what we will find is that those new approaches, including something like teleology, are going to point even more than they do now to a divine being, a divine designer.
So I want to kind of get an overview of your journey. So you encountered these different things in science, and let's just get a quick summary of those. So abiogenesis, quantum mechanics, was there anything else that really stuck out?
Well, the fine-tuning argument.
Fine-tuning argument, okay.
Really, I learned about that later, but yes, that was definitely another.
So those were some of the science. Was there anything else scientifically that?
Well, there's actually a lot of other things. Some of them are not very well known, but Just the idea that there's a lot in physics that is not known and is very surprising, and physicists themselves, or some of them, are getting a little nervous because it looks like the CERN, for example, the CERN collider has not given the results that people are hoping for. A lot of theories have been thrown out. I can't go into details because I'm not a physicist, and this is just from what I'm reading. So, and there are other parts of biology that are incredibly suggestive of something way beyond anything we can understand, including consciousness, including human behavior. I mean, the idea that evolution, Darwinian evolution by natural selection, explains why, we have morality, or explains why we're creative, or we love music. That's just nonsense. That's not even scientific. Those are stories, okay? So what makes us human? What does it mean to be in the image of God? Well, we have a sense, right? Everybody has a sense that human beings are not just animals who are smart. Some people deny that, and I have never, even as an atheist, I never went along with that view. I always knew that human beings were somehow special, very special. I didn't know why, I didn't know where it came from, but
and some people could say, like, okay, that's very human of you to say that you are very special. And some people will come at this conversation from that perspective that, well, of course you would say that you want to be the smart one out of everything. You want to feel special, and that's where it comes from. But I know people who own pets and they love their pets, but they definitely can see that there's a difference in terms of uniqueness between themselves and those pets. It's not as a result of wanting to feel different. You just know that you are. And it's like talking about like this might be a weird example, but like a lion in a jungle. The lion just knows that if he needs to fight for himself, based on the experiences that it's had, he knows what he's capable of doing. So in that same, like, through that same lens, it's like, this is not a matter of, oh, of course you would say you're different just because you want to feel different, you want to be more. What you know, what you are, what you feel, it's there, it's inbuilt. I've talked before about the fact that the Bible says that eternity is written on the heart of every man, so that people can know that there is something that happens after this life, so that they can make a decision of how they're going to treat that thing. To say, not that they will say they never heard about it, but in the same way, there's just some things that are written into who you are, into your person, that allows you to know certain things even if you deny it.
I do.
So then that was kind of a summary of the science that kind of led you toward theism. But then what was like, I know you mentioned like there were several different experiences that you had at church and dreams and everything. What was one that really stuck out to you that really contributed to your eventual accepting Christianity as true?
Well, I can tell you about one of the dreams, which there were two main ones that I believe involved intercession from the Spirit.
Were you at this time, like really investigating? Okay. Were you reading scripture a lot? Were you praying at all?
The first one, I wasn't even thinking about Christianity or belief. I was an agnostic. I didn't know what was going on.
Okay.
And I didn't understand the dream at all when I had it.
Yeah, that's what I was almost gonna say. That I was trying to pause quickly enough, but I was almost gonna say, like, because I was talking about how there's you searching for something, and then there's you possibly having an experience. But it's possible that you have an experience without searching, and you might not even know what experience you had. You might not understand it. You might not know that it's an experience, because what basis do you have for understanding it? It's like somebody giving you a book in a language that you don't understand. If you never learn the language, you never understand it.
And it was a very frightening dream.
Unless somebody else comes to explain to you what's in the book. But then again, you're understanding that person's explanation of the book and hoping that they're correct. It's still different.
Because I don't like heights, and I was hanging from the edge of a cliff, terrified. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't climb up. I was holding on with my hands, and I screamed out, "Help, help." I didn't know who I was calling to. I just said, "Help, help," and I heard a voice say, "Just let go." And I said, what? I fall down. And the voice said, "Just let go." So I finally said, well, okay. So I let go. And the moment I let go, the entire landscape turned 90 degrees. And instead of hanging from a cliff, I was lying on the ground. And there was a man whose voice I had heard standing there. That was the man who said, "Just let go." I woke up and I was like, whoa. What was that? I didn't know what he meant by "just let go." I didn't know who it was. And then eventually, of course, I found out that, of course, the man was Jesus Christ, and what I had to let go of was all the baggage that was in my life that was preventing me, absolutely blocking me from even considering the idea of a God. And eventually I did let go of all of that.
Wow, that's crazy. Was there another one? You mentioned
the other one
that
was
a little bit
later, and the other one was I was already thinking about maybe believing in something. I don't remember exactly where I was, but what I do know is I had never been.
And well, just for you guys to, I mean, we read about this not too long ago, just to give a little bit of context to what is being spoken about here. Because someone might listen to this now and feel like, well, why haven't I had my own dream where this is happening? It's not just everybody can have, you can have an experience that but it also depends on, everybody's not going to get their experience the same way, is what I'm trying to get at. Because you haven't seen yourself dangling and someone calling you and saying "just let go," something like this man's testimony, me sharing this, could also be your own experience for you to see that maybe there is something there that's drawing to you. Because you didn't have to be here, you didn't have to stop into this stream, you didn't have to stop into this video, you didn't have to click it, but you did. And maybe it's just that reason and that reason alone that something is calling you and drawing you. But I want to refer to this scripture that we read on I think this one we read maybe Friday last week. So let's just start from 41. Therefore the Jews were grumbling about him because he said, "I am the bread that came out of heaven." They were saying, "Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he now say, I have come down out of heaven?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "Do not grumble amongst yourselves." And this is where I'm getting to. "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him." And for this man at this time, he didn't pay no attention to anything whether it came to Christianity or anything. He just had a dream that had its own meaning, but he couldn't really understand what it was. But God is still drawing you. And for you to think, well, why does God have to draw me? Maybe he's drawing some people and he's not drawing other people, instead of me actually just telling you. I'm going to show you what Jesus says about that. Let's see. So here, this is a prayer from Timothy. First of all, then, I urge that entreaties and prayers, petitions and thanksgivings be made on behalf of all men, for kings and all who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. This is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior. Now, just so you understand why Timothy's words can be relevant, it's because everything, the Bible also says that all scripture are inspired by God. So it's not just Timothy that's writing this. This is he's sharing this because it was revealed to him to share. So he's saying this is good for you to petition and pray for others. It's good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior. And he's saying, for God, who desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. So it's not just that man who had a dream. It's not just the lady or me or anybody that you know that's a Christian who had an experience. Everybody is having some kind of experience. The question is, when are you going to look into those experiences that you've actually had? That's what the question is. It's not that you wouldn't get an experience. He desires it, and you can't come unless he draws you, so he will draw you. The question is, if he draws you, would you come? And let's just finish reading this. It says, for there is one God and one mediator as also between God and men, the man Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a ransom for all, the testimony given at the proper time. For this I was appointed a preacher and an apostle. I am telling the truth. I am not lying, as a teacher of the Gentiles in faith and truth. So we'll go back to the video, but just so you know, any thoughts that people might be having in terms of like, okay, great, he had a dream, I didn't. It's not about that anymore because you've heard more.
Been to a church yet, other than that one Catholic church. I might have been there already, but I had never.
What were they wearing? The Franciscans? Were they like
brown robes? Yeah. That freaked me out a little.
Wasn't
bit.
that cool though? It was kind of
cool. It was cool. They were very cool people. They were really nice.
Like the little rope.
Yeah, little rope. Yeah, I thought that was weird.
Did they like shave their heads?
I don't remember that. They might have. Yeah, I don't remember.
Catholics, man, Catholics.
Yeah, well.
So
that's another story.
Yeah. So tell me about the experience.
So I had not yet read the gospel. That's definite. So I had a dream that I was walking around a garden trying to get in, a walled garden, and I couldn't get in. It was very steep walls, and I kept trying to climb up, and I found vines and little things, but I couldn't get to the top, and I got really frustrated, and I kept going around. And then I saw a man, and he said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, I want to get in, and I can't climb over. He said, "Well, then use the door. There it is." So I walked in, opened the door and walked in, and there was the garden. And later, when I was in church, I think the first time I went to the church I'm now a member of, there was a picture of Jesus knocking on the door. But I had never heard that knock on the door, and if you knock, it will be open for you. That was, I had yet to read that, but I dreamed it.
I want to tell you another scripture actually, because what he's talking about in terms of like knock and the door will be open to you, there's actually a different scripture. Man, just wow. Because I don't even think till this point he knows, because he just referenced the scripture, and the scripture that he's referenced is not even his dream. This is why I'm talking about, like, you can have a book in a language you don't understand and never know what is written in it. To show you even more how, like, he's not just making something up because it's a nice story to tell. That's not the reason for it. Okay, so I like to give a little bit of context, but I know in Revelations there's a lot going on, so maybe I'll just start from 19 here. So first of all, he says, those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. Good for you to hear that as well, because some people feel as though the life of a Christian is just supposed to be all nice and dandy. Well, there's also the fact of discipline, because like I said, I'm not a good person because I continue to do wrong. I don't live in the doing of wrong, but I can still do wrong, and I do still do wrong things. I do still sin. And when there's sin there, well, there's reprove and there's discipline. It says, therefore be zealous and repent, which is important. Now, verse 20 says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. By the way, when you see something written in red, that means it's God, or it's, I'm not sure if all Bibles do God and Jesus speaking, but it's either God or Jesus that's speaking when you see red. I believe it's Jesus specifically. I'll have to fact check myself on that. But that's him talking about Jesus knocking on the door. Now, that's not what happened in his dream, but that expression that he saw on that wall in that church is this. Not if you knock on the door, Jesus will open, because Jesus didn't open the door. Jesus didn't open the door in his dream either. He wasn't knocking on the door either. He was trying to find a way to come into the room. But it says here, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and will dine with him and he with me. That's what's happened there. And like I said, again, this guy is not trying to do some conspiracy theory. He's literally sharing his experience. He doesn't even fully understand his experience yet. But from the scripture, you can get some understanding of what's happening in his dream. At least you even do more than him who's experienced it. So Jesus is at that door and he's knocking on that door. And he's just saying, if anyone hears my voice and you open and you look, remember I said about allowing yourself, opening up, opening your heart to something, opening yourself to something. That's what the difference is. Man.
So that had a big effect on me, as you can see.
Yeah, I'm like about to start tearing up myself. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot more.
That's life in a nutshell for everybody, for most people, man. You're just going around searching for this thing. You don't know what you're even searching for. You're just looking around, you're just trying, you're just doing different things and trying to like exist. No real direction. You're following the direction that, well, maybe your parents did, or the people around you did, and you're just trying to do the same cycle. But you feel like there's something you're supposed to be doing, you just don't know what it is. But then there's one way out of that never-ending cycle. Because wouldn't it suck if you're doing that for now? You die, and that's what you're doing again forever. Except this time, you know you can't even get the answer. You're just there wandering in eternal separation from God. That'd be unfortunate.
To cover,
because this is not some conversation about like, oh, you will go to hellfire because you're a bad person. Well, I just told you I sin. Do some of the sins that some of you do as well. It's not about you're a bad person and I'm a good person. I'm not a good person. We're both not good people. It's about just coming to the knowledge of the truth. That thing that you're already searching for, there's answers to it. You just need to open yourself to it.
We're in this short interview, but is there anything that you'd like to leave with the audience before we close it out?
Yeah, I think I have one main message. I think I was called, as so many of us are called, to give one message to people who are questioning their faith, especially if they're questioning it because of science. And that's the reason I wrote my book. It's the reason I'm writing, articles. Science and Christian faith are absolutely not in conflict. I understand that people growing up in faith occasionally will lose it for various reasons, but one of those reasons should never be science, okay? Because science is not anti-Christian, science is not atheistic. Christianity was instrumental in the foundation of science, in the beginning of science. All the original scientists were Christians, and that remains. There's still many, many scientists who are Christians despite the current atmosphere, which is somewhat hostile to Christianity. But my prediction is, what I see now happening is that atheists are beginning to deny the reality of science. You find atheists saying, no, the universe didn't have a beginning, it's been there forever. No. They say the DNA is not a code, there's no genetic code, it's not a real code. Wrong. And the reason, these are not scientists necessarily, but they're atheists who think they are seeing this from various people. And the reason they're attacking scientific facts, because they are,
is because science does would align with
it.
it.
Are pointing more and more to what they don't want to accept, which is that this world has a creator, and everything we see is part of the creation, including ourselves. So, if you are being told that you have to choose between science and your Christian faith, reject that. Whoever told you that is wrong. It's not true. What's true is Christianity.
Wow. Well, interesting. Again, whenever I finish one of these videos, I just hope to, I hope someone learned something, someone heard something. That's all I hope for. That's all I pray for whenever I come and I do this. For those of you who were in the stream today, who listened, who typed something in chat, who watched the stream, watched the video, maybe you even end up watching this on your own after this, I appreciate it. And I hope that, as God said in his word, that he's going to draw people to him, that you would yield yourself, we would all continue to yield ourselves to that drawing so that we can know what the truth is. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Take it easy. God bless you.